or not heavily into all of the specifics with the law and the requirements, but we're scanning through these discourses, these speeches, trying to just reflect on Moses, as a character, Moses as a person, what was in his heart and his mind. Obviously, he was communicating God's will to them, and there's large sections. I think we'll start really getting into it today, where there's large sections where he's describing various laws, various regulations. Those obviously were all given by God for a purpose, and they're worth reflecting on. But for the purposes of our study, I'm just going to go through the chapters and point out a few what I feel like are highlights as far as seeing how Moses is communicating to them, the main themes of what he's communicating. And all of this is under just the general umbrella of the fact that you have a man who knows his time on earth is short. He has proven himself to be an amazing servant of the Lord, amazing servant of others, meek man, putting others above himself in so many ways. He's a foreshadowing of Christ, which is where we're going to go after this. We're going to think about Moses in the New Testament and how he reflected Jesus. But just in this going through of Deuteronomy, this quick review of Deuteronomy, thinking about this being his final speech to them, his final opportunity to affect and influence the generation that was coming behind him, and just using this as motivation for us. This whole book to me is motivation for me to think about trying to encourage others where I can, especially people that I have direct connection to, my family, my children. If the Lord blesses me with grandchildren, these are the people that are directly connected to you that we need to be trying to do everything we can to lift up and encourage. And that's what Moses is doing. He is like a father to these people, and he's doing everything he can before he checks out to make sure that they are reminded of the things that they need to be reminded of. And just one more time, we'll probably say it again, but he's very repetitive in this book, very repetitive. And I know we've all had conversations with people older than us, parents, grandparents, older Christians, and you get sitting down with them and like, oh, this is very repetitive. I've heard this before. They're telling me things that I know. And one thing I'd like us to do when we're feeling that is just think about the reality that they're motivated to encourage you. That's coming because they want to encourage you, and we need to have that mentality for others, and we need to be willing to give and receive that, knowing that that we all need to be reminded. We all need things to be repeated from time to time. It's encouraging. That's really what we're doing. And this book to me is a great example of just the encouragement of Moses, and it's seen through repetition. So we've gone through this. This is the first discourse. The first 4 chapters ends just a little bit before the end of chapter 4. And then you get into the second discourse, which we're in the middle of, which is, pretty good chunk of the book, more than half of the book, really. So we've been going through that. Basically, what I've been doing is just giving kind of chapter headings for each chapter that we get to, and then going through and pointing out some highlights. So as you think back, chapter 5, he goes into the story, retelling of how the 10 Commandments came. Chapter 6, beautiful section there about the greatest commandment. Jesus quotes that about being the greatest commandment, but we don't just see it in chapter 6. You see it in 8, you see it in 10. Love the Lord your God. Love the Lord your God. So much the foundation of everything else that he's describing. In chapter 7, you have sections there where he's appealing to them to be separate from the nations that they're going in to dispossess. They need to strive to be holy. You need to cut off all of the influences of these nations, which obviously they failed. They failed at that almost immediately, which that's got great application for us to think about. Chapter 8 describes the discipline of the Lord. I thought that was just a beautiful section. He describes their whole period of wilderness wanderings as the Lord disciplining them. He gave them hunger. He gave them thirst. What a great gift. Thank you for letting me be hungry. Thank you for letting me thirst. But he describes that as a gift from the Lord to teach them to trust him, to teach them to trust him. That's beautiful. If we could learn to look at the challenges of our life that way, and certainly the New Testament uses that same language of us dealing with the trials and hardships of life and seeing joy from that, because we know that the testing of our faith produces endurance, and endurance produces hope and steadfastness. This is all in the New Testament. Also, the discipline of the Lord, we see that in Hebrews 12, where he talks about God disciplining us as sons that we can share his holiness. That was his plan for them, and that's his plan for us. Exactly the same thing. He tells them God's giving them the land. It's not because of you. It's not because of your righteousness. And he points to the golden calf as an immediate, obvious reminder that, hey, you don't deserve what you're about to get. You do not deserve what you're about to get. And chapter 10, which we talked about last Sunday, the concept of circumcising the heart, that is a powerful image that we can see God even back here in the Old Testament, where people will say, oh, in the Old Testament, he didn't care about the heart. All he cared about was the rules and the regulations. No, he's always cared about the heart. This is always what he's cared about. We see it here in Deuteronomy, and you see it throughout the Bible narrative, that he's trying to win our hearts. He's trying to get us to serve him out of love and not just out of fear or anything like that. So chapter 11, we come back around, which we finished talking about last week, loving the Lord, teaching our children, and we're introduced to this idea of the blessing and the curse that is going to come back again. But if you look at the end of chapter 11, verse 26, I'm setting before you today a blessing and a curse. Verse 27, if you obey, you're going to be blessed. Verse 28, if you do not obey and turn aside, then you're going to be cursed. And he even specifically mentions reading the blessings, verse 29, on Mount Gerizim and the curses on Mount Ebal, which we see done. Joshua does that once he takes the land. So you see this very clear choice. And, that to me, it's a powerful picture of where all of us are. All of us are down in the valley of decision. We're down in the middle between Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. And every day we decide. Every day we decide, am I going to obey and move toward the blessings of the Lord, or am I going to disobey and move toward the curses? It's exactly the same thing that Romans 3 describes. Romans 6 describes the wages of sin is death. So these are all powerful images for us to learn from. So chapter 12, we talked about that as well. He starts describing here that God is going to pick a place. God is going to pick a place, and he wants you to worship him there, as opposed to worshiping the way the nations worshiped, where they picked every high place, every tree. They worshiped him, wherever they wanted to. God didn't want that. And that's worth meditating on and thinking about why that is. But I think at least one very powerful reason is just to be separate. These people they're worshiping the way they want to worship. And God says, I want you to worship me in this place, and it's going to be different. I don't want you to do what everybody's been doing. I want you to do it this way. Rhodes pointed out, the first place that the tabernacle is a symbol of Shiloh, stays there up until Solomon's day, where God has picked Jerusalem. I guess it's repitched somewhere in there toward Jerusalem during David's reign. Yeah.
It was captured by the Philistines. I mean, it was in the house of Sarah.
Yeah. Well, that's just the ark, though.
That's just the
ark. Yeah. So there's obviously things that are happening between then, but eventually Jerusalem is the place, and you can see people praying toward Jerusalem, coming to Jerusalem. He says, in this, I think it's in this chapter, verse 11, where he says he wants them to go to that place where he makes his name dwell. And if you're reading Deuteronomy through, you're going to see that phrase a lot of times. He's going to keep pointing back to this. I want you to go to the place that I have chosen for my name to dwell. Go to that place. So that's really the context of chapter 12. And we did finish last week a little bit quickly, going through the end of chapter 12, where he specifically says, verse 30, take care that you're not ensnared to follow them. This is why they have been destroyed. They've been destroyed because of these things. So don't copy that. Don't emulate that. And he specifically points to verse 31, that they have done every abominable thing that the Lord hates. They have done for their God. So if you can think about and just remember that under the umbrella of serving gods, people have done everything that the Lord hates. They have convinced themselves to do things that the Lord hates in the name of worshiping gods. Isn't that's amazing that men can literally rationalize anything in the service of their gods, everything that they want to do. I have this desire, I have this lust, I have this motivation, and I'm going to worship God by doing what I want to do. That they've convinced themselves of that, of every abominable thing, and God is trying to separate that. He's trying to get that out. I want you to worship me the way that I have outlined. It's such a great thing for us to remember. But in this, he says they even burn their sons and daughters in the fire to their gods. And this is something that, the nations that Israel was casting out, they had been sacrificing their children to their gods. And the Israelites, not that many years from now, will be doing the same thing. They will be doing the same thing. We're going to study in the sermon today about Ahab. And certainly by Ahab's time, that was happening. But well before that even, they were sacrificing their children to gods. And, in our discussion last week, I think it's very powerful to see a connection between that and what people are doing today with abortion. I don't think it's a stretch at all. In fact, I think it's the same thing. Basically, what people are doing is sacrificing their children, sacrificing their offspring on the altar of career, on the altar of convenience, on the altar of pleasure. They're willing to sacrifice their offspring for those things. They're serving those things instead of accepting and raising and trying to bless this child that God has given them. I know it's very powerful language, but I think that's exactly the same thing. All right, so we're any other thoughts, comments down through chapter 12? Try to move forward. All right, chapter 13. He talks here about dealing with false prophets. If somebody comes with a sign, with a wonder, verses 1 and 2, how are we supposed to know? How were they supposed to know whether this person is from God or not? He comes telling them to do this, do that. How are they supposed to know if they should listen or not? Okay.
One, does it come back?
Right.
Second thing, is the teaching consistent with what has been taught?
That's right. If the teaching is not consistent, but also if he makes a prediction and it doesn't come to pass, don't listen to him. Absolutely. Pretty simple. Pretty simple. Verse 3. And really verse 2, right? If he says, let us go after other gods. Red flag. Red flag. Go after other gods. But also verse 3. You shall not listen to the words of the prophet or the dreamer of dreams, for the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall walk after the Lord your God and fear him, keep his commandments, obey his voice. You shall serve him and hold fast to him. So then in the following verses, what's to be done with this dreamer of dreams? What's to be done with this person who's trying to get them to listen to a different message?
Commands that we put to death.
Be put to death.
Purge of sin.
That's right. What if it's my mom? What if it's my dad? What if it's my son?
There's not an asterisk.
There is not. In fact, he specifically says in verse 6, if it's your mother, if it's your brother, if it's your son, if it's your daughter, he says down in verse 8, you shall not yield to him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pity him, nor shall you spare him, nor shall you conceal him. Don't even try to hide it. Don't pity this. It's got to be dealt with. And we talked about this, I forget which chapter, just a few chapters ago, where he's talking about dealing with the sin among them, and drawing a parallel to that. They needed to root out the sin, because if they didn't, it would have a influence. It would have an influence on others. They would be emboldened towards sin if sin is not punished. And we see that same instruction in the New Testament. Not that we're told to stone anybody, obviously, but we are supposed to remove the wickedness from our number. If they won't repent, we're supposed to remove them from our number. And I think we could take this language to our hearts if we're dealing with something like that. Don't spare them. Don't pity them. No matter the relationship. If it's got to be done, it's got to be done for their benefit. So maybe they can be affected to change, but also for the benefit of the congregation, so that they don't influence others or embolden others to stay in sin. Obviously, that with this covenant, they were building a physical nation, and so you have the instructions of physical capital punishment, because nations have that power, they have that authority. As a congregation, as New Testament Christians, God has never asked for that. So we need to see that separation. But when you're looking back here and thinking about, he's trying to build a holy nation. He's trying to teach them how to build a holy nation, and this is what would be required for that. Mm-hmm.
He warns these that would entice you secretly, and we see that in some of the warnings of Peter or Jude, that a lot of times false teachers are not bold enough to stand in front of the congregation of people who can easily challenge or call them to account with teaching. It's like picking off the ones that they perceive are susceptible to the message that they're bringing. And any of us who've been around long enough have known that when you've had difficulties in conversation and congregations, a lot of times that's where it starts is secret enticements that then become that groundswell.
Absolutely. And you can see, I think, that kind of thing being alluded to down in verse 12. Verse 12, where this 13, these worthless fellows have gone and drawn away inhabitants of cities. So you're not going to start off teaching the false doctrine, in Shiloh or in Jerusalem. You're going to go to one of these cities and you're going to try to find a foothold where you see weakness, and spread your false teaching there. And he says, if that's happened, where this false teacher has gotten a foothold in the city, what is supposed to happen? If that city's bought into it, if that city has accepted this false teaching, destroy the city, destroy the livestock, don't pity them. It seems so harsh to us, but this is the prescription for building a holy nation, and that's what God was trying to help them to do. Even to the point of their possessions, everything was supposed to be burnt with fire. And again, I say again, we see things like that where they're actually burning possessions, they're burning valuable things, destroying the livestock. And we're like, well, what did the cattle ever do to you? Why are we burning cattle? And part of it is just God wanting to drive the point home. This is no joke. This is no joke. Cleansing. That's right. That's right. That's right. Yes, ma'am.
You see that with Josiah when he goes through and he cleanses the kingdom. He burns the altars and he doesn't even leave the ashes in the kingdom. He puts the ashes in the river and lets them get carried downstream. It is complete and total purging of anything that would taint them spiritually.
And doing something that thoroughly would leave an impression in people's minds. This is no small thing. This is serious. I think that's exactly right. some of those thoughts are going to come back up. We'll kind of push forward. Feel free to go back to some of that. So in chapter 14, we see these instructions for clean and unclean food. We're not going to get into the specifics of that unless somebody has a point they want to make off of it. But I think kind of the main points, verse 2, you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession out of all the people who are on the face of the earth. You shall not eat any abominations. And he goes through and he describes in detail what is okay, what is not okay. And the point is that God wants them to be a holy people. He wants them to be his treasured possession, his treasured people. And if they would follow these rules, then they would be what he wants them to be, what he needs them to be. And we could sit here and argue, and I've heard some good cases. I think there's some interesting thoughts to be gleaned from some of the dietary restrictions and some of the clean and unclean restrictions being good for us, better for our health. I can see some points in all of that, but I don't think most of that they wouldn't have been able to figure out. For them, what they were asked to do was just trust God. Trust God. This is what's okay. This is what I don't want you touching. This is what I consider abominable. If you stay over here, you will be my holy people. You'll be my treasured possession. And that's the same lesson we need to take, is whether we understand God's laws, whether we understand them or not. Now, it is profitable to ask why. Why does God ask us to sing and not have instruments? Why does he ask us to do the Lord's Supper every first day of the week? I think it's profitable to ask why every now and then. But also, just even if you can't understand the why, just stand where you know he's happy with you. Stand where you know he's happy with you. I'm sorry, Tiffany, go ahead.
Well, the Bible start to finish is the account of God taking care of his creation. A lot of the things he told them in Leviticus, a lot of the things he told them in Deuteronomy, they had no clue why they were told that, but they knew God said it. Now we have, in our brilliant science, discovered since then why he told them some of those things. Oh, okay, well, they wouldn't have had, they wouldn't be able to cook that to the right temperature. They were parasites. They had to break a jar that was open and everyone was going to be sick because of airborne pathogens. We get that now. They didn't. So there's going to be things that we come across that we're like, okay, I have no idea why God's telling me to do that, but you break the jar. You don't eat food, whatever it is, because you know that it's him taking care of you, whether physically, like in this case, or spiritually. In our case, you don't have to understand it. You just have to understand him.
That's exactly right.
I often wonder too, why he gave these things for looking ahead in the future, as to the time we talked to Peter. It became different.
Yeah.
Because he said so. Yeah. I just think that he could see ahead what he wanted to do.
Yeah, and honestly, Steve, I think there, as God always does, there are purposes and meanings for these commandments for this time, but there's also purposes and meanings that we're supposed to glean from it in the new covenant. And I think there's also purposes and meanings for eternity that we probably don't quite understand yet. We probably don't come close to understand yet. So we trust God. At every point, we trust God. But you're exactly right. He uses this clean and unclean distinction to show very powerfully how God has welcomed all men into his kingdom. Absolutely. Oh, my goodness. Absolutely. Yeah, there's a few things in here like, hey, if you had verse 19, if you thought about maybe eating meat and insects, let's not do that. If you see anything that's died naturally, stay away from that. Verse 21, there's things that we look at instinctively and like, that's probably smart, that's probably really smart. But for them, like Tiffany was saying, they couldn't have figured all of that out. They needed to just trust God. Needed to trust him. So we'll come back on that. He touches on this again. This is going to come back up in the same speech. He's going to come back around. He's going back and forth between a myriad of topics here. It really does. It's like sitting down with Grandpa and listen and hearing his heart. He's pouring out his heart, talking to you about this, and then now we're back to that. And now we're going to go talk to this. And to me, it's a beautiful picture of a man who really cares about them, trying to say everything he can before he departs.
Our
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Don't always have to understand why. Just do it. And I don't know why he chose water. Just do it. There we go. Water's a good why baptism. To me, I feel like instruments in worship is one that I think is a good example of that because, from my standpoint, I see wisdom in there not being instruments here. Wisdom, if we don't have an instrument, then we're focused on the words. We're focused on the thoughts that affect our heart and the spiritual mindedness, and teaching and admonishing. But somebody else might say, well, man, when I hear that tune, I hear that piano kick in, it just takes me to a spiritual place. So I don't understand well, that's why Derek's point is important. It's not about whether we see the wisdom or not. That's not the point. The point is, this is what God asked for. This is what he asked for. So let's stand in the spot where we know he's happy with us. That's my point with all of this, or all of our New Testament stuff for sure. So getting into the last part of chapter 14, you see this instructions to tithe, or the instructions to tithe. This is something that's going to come back again in the speech, but he's describing the fact that he wants them to tithe, verse 22, of all of the yield of your seed, anything that it produces. And as I say, he's going to come back to this later in greater detail. He's introducing it here. He also introduces the idea of verse 27 that they are not to neglect the Levite. This is from this point on, he's going to say that probably 30 more times. Like, don't neglect the Levite. Don't neglect the Levite. The Levite has no inheritance. The Levite has no portion. His inheritance is the Lord. Therefore, take care of the Levite. Don't neglect him. So it's a very interesting picture that he's giving us there. For the Levites who were dedicated to the service of the Lord. That was their role, that was their purpose, and the rest of the nation was supposed to support them and help them in that. That's an interesting picture for us to meditate on. That's I kind of paraphrase verse 28 and 29 there. He gives them the instruction that they're supposed to actually take the physical tithe, but if it was too much to take, he gives them the instructions. You can go ahead and sell that and then take the money of that and then go give the money. So that instruction is in there as well, but still tithing is important. And he's going to later, when he comes back to it, he's going to talk more about the motivation for that, or the reason behind it. So here, chapter 15, we get this instruction about the sabbatical year, the Sabbath year. He's describing here how, again, every seventh year, property that was sold, and even servants, if somebody had sold themselves into servitude, every seventh year, that goes back. They are either granted their freedom or the property goes back. And so, transactions of that nature were not permanent. It's very interesting to think about the way God set up slavery, or the way, I should be careful how I say that, the way God allowed slavery to exist versus the way the world was doing slavery. And I think it's important to think about, because sometimes people point to these kinds of instructions and say, well, why didn't God just abolish slavery? Why didn't he just abolish it? Well, they lived in a world where slavery was everywhere. Slavery was everywhere. And God's restriction on it is very impressive. It's amazing the instructions he gives them for limiting it, and reminding them that person in slavery he's still your brother. Don't treat him as an enemy. He's still your brother. And what we're trying to do, even if he has sold himself into slavery, we're trying to help him. We're trying to help him to get back on his own 2 feet. Give him his freedom back, give him his property back at the end of that seventh year. So that's as far as wisdom, separate from the world. Wisdom, as Steve said, his ways are higher than our ways. he's trying to help them to separate from the way the world is doing things to a much higher level. And I think it leads us to the New Testament, where, in the New Testament, he doesn't abolish slavery either, but he does teach us in the New Testament that there's neither slave nor free. We are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you as a Christian apply that, then you are going to abolish slavery in your life. As far as you are concerned, there's no place for slavery. And so in that, I think it's a really powerful example of how God has trained mankind to give up these things, to give up slavery. I kind of file it in my mind under the heading of, God allowing certain things for a certain time because of the hardness of men's hearts. Here in just a few chapters, Moses is going to allow for divorce. And Jesus specifically says God never wanted it that way, but he allowed it for a time because of the hardness of your hearts. He allowed it for a time. And that's kind of how I see this as well. He's allowing, there to be slavery for a time, but here are the rules for governing. Here is the rules to govern it. One of the things that's pretty interesting, and again, we can't break it all down, but look down in verse 9, because I know this is where my mind would go, is like, okay, so if I have to release him at the end of the 7th year, then, I'm not going to really, pay very much for him. I'm going to try to I'm going to calculate that into my business. So I'm going to have to release him in 3 years. So, I'm not going to pay very much. I'm not going to get aggressive, or I'll wait until that 7th year and then buy all the slaves that I can. But look what he says about that. Verse 9, take care lest there be an unworthy thought in your heart, and you say, the 7th year, the year of release, is near, and your eye look grudgingly on your poor brother, and you give him nothing, and he cry to the Lord against you, and you be guilty of sin. Take care lest there be an unworthy thought in your heart. In relation to this 7th year release, and you start doing calculus based off of that. It's like, I don't want to buy anybody now. And, basically, what are you doing? You're not trying to help anybody. You're trying to take advantage of the situation. And he says, don't let that be your calculus. Don't let that be in your mind. I think this is so important for us to think about in our business dealings, in our dealings with people where we're trying to help people. Let's really try to help them. Let's really try to help them instead of trying to take advantage of a situation for our own benefit.
What we know as slavery in our lifetimes, where people were taking a good advantage, versus when he's talking about when this person leaves here, you're supposed to make sure he's taken care of. If this person came to you and didn't have family, Lord made provisions for him. He was to stay. If they took a life from him, then he made provisions for him to be able to stay with that family. There's a difference there, I think, in what we understand slavery and what it was servitude, because you had gotten in a position where you had no means to maybe correct it.
That's exactly right. Yeah, so they would sell themselves to pay off the debt, work off the debt, and then that 7th year comes, it's forgiven. That's right. Very powerful. You see this section down in verse 16 through 18, you alluded to, if you're getting ready to offer somebody their freedom, and he says, I don't want my freedom, I want to stay and serve you. He makes an arrangement for that. If somebody wants to dedicate themselves to you, you have this procedure of piercing their ear in order to for them to show that this is what they have chosen, this is what they want. And then I think to our American mindset, we're like, well, why would anybody ever do that? Why would anybody want to be a slave? Like, hey, if you were a slave of a good master, if you were a slave of somebody who took care of you and cared about you, that could be a wonderful arrangement. And we know that because we're all servants of the Almighty God. We're all slaves of Him. And He's a great master. And He loves us and gives us commands for our benefit. Yes, He asks us to do difficult things, but it's for our good that we may share His holiness. It's wonderful to serve a good master. And that's the difference, as Darren was describing, between the slavery that man invented, the slavery that man took advantage of others with, and the slavery that God allows for a time, which was intended to help somebody get back on their feet. That's exactly right. Let me ask you something. This goes right in line with Darren's comment. Look at verse 4. He says, there will be no poor among you. And then compare that with verse 11, where he says, for there will never cease to be poor in the land. Wait a minute. Did Moses just go crazy? Like, what in the world? Like, within 10 verses here, there will be no poor. There will always be poor. What gives? What's going on?
Continuation of what he's saying. He's like, except when there may be. So he's like, if foreigners come, and this situation arises, you're going to keep doing this until such a time as there is no poor. Versus, look, guys, there's not really going to be that time, so just keep doing it.
That's right. That's right. That's right. If everybody would have the right mindset, and everybody would look after their brother and the foreigner, if everybody would have, because we've already seen instructions to take care of the foreigner. If we see, if everybody's doing what they should do, then we wouldn't be able to see any poor in the land because everybody's being taken care of. But to your point, you said it very well. There will always be people that need to be taken care of. There will always be people that. That's right. Yeah, I was going to get there. See, absolutely. No, you're great, perfect. Yeah, this is the thing. Like, I've heard people argue, it's like, well, why should I give to the collection? Why should I do this? Why should I do that? Because in the New Testament they gave to specific needs and XYZ, and I can see some of that's worth thinking about. But basically what you're arguing is that there are no needs. Is that your argument? There are no needs. You're not going to give to the treasury because there are no needs. That you're not opening your eyes. You're not opening your eyes. There will always be needs. And that's, for us as individuals to think about who have I helped lately? Who did I help last year? Because there are needs everywhere. If we'll open our eyes, there are needs everywhere. So yeah, well said. And I think that's exactly right. Do not harden your heart. Carry that phrase with you. Verse 7. If among you one of your brothers should become poor in any of your towns within the land that the Lord your God has given you, you shall not harden your heart or shut your hand against the poor brother. Don't harden your heart. Let's keep our hearts open. Let's keep looking for opportunities to serve and not become hardened against the idea that somebody needs help.
Yeah. Everything he's doing here is and the selling themselves. They still could get war slaves that were regulated differently, but they were still to be treated humanely, like if you had taken a wife of a conquered nation and she no longer favored you, you couldn't sell her as a slave or whatever.
That's chapter 20.
Yeah. And so there were restrictions on that, but among the Hebrews, there's this idea, they're going to be ones who need help, and that's going to move around depending on different circumstances. But when it comes down to it, you continue to take care of each other.
Absolutely. Yep, good points. Both sides of that. The fact that this is mostly for Israelite to Israelite interaction versus, and also the fact that he governs their interaction with foreigners as well, which we've already seen some, and we're going to see again. Yes, sir.
Scripture tells us to do good to all, and especially those.
Yeah, great. Absolutely. Connecting it to the New Testament for us. Absolutely. Good thoughts. Appreciate that. All right. Chapter 16 gives the instructions for the Passover and other feasts. This Passover obviously has already been introduced. He introduced it when it was happening. The first one, the first Passover that they observed, he tells them then that he wants them to always observe this, always observe it. And so he's given them instructions for it then. He gave it some more instructions in Leviticus, and now we're coming back to it in Deuteronomy. And he reminds them the Lord brought you out of the land of Egypt by night. Verse 1. This is the reason. This is why we're doing the Passover, is to remind ourselves of what God has done for us. And this is a reoccurring theme that Moses is constantly coming back to, is we're doing this because God has done all this for us. We're trying to remember what he's done, and certainly the Passover is a part of that. I'm not going to get into all the specifics unless somebody has a comment to make off of it. But I think one verse that stood out to me in chapter 16, verse 16, 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place that he will choose. So that connects back to that language we were referring to earlier. God's going to choose a place, and now he's telling them 3 times a year, I want you to come to this place. And when you think about the fact that would have been a journey, that would have been a couple days journey for them, some of them, to get there to Jerusalem, to Shiloh, that's a pretty big ask. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Which is why we see devout men from every nation under heaven gathered on the day of Pentecost.
What you're saying here, when God sends Abraham to the mountains of Moriah to sacrifice Isaac, he tells him he will provide the lamb for sacrifice. He doesn't. It's a ram. Father degrees till I realize that where he sends him is this same mountain range where he ends up establishing Jerusalem, where he ends up crucifying Christ. So he does provide a lamb for sacrifice on that exact same mountain range where Abraham said God will provide a lamb. So in reminding the people, he's keeping it fresh in the people's minds so that when the Jews finally do get the Messiah, they're like, oh wait, here's this. Oh wait, the Passover, the blood of the lamb on wooden beams is what saved it. All these things that he was keeping fresh in their minds so that they would be able to more clearly understand that Jesus was who had been promised to them.
Absolutely. Great point. Well said. Just real quickly to try to finish chapter 16, there's a section here at the end, 18 through 20, where he talks about judging with righteous judgment. Don't pervert justice. Don't show partiality. Don't accept a bribe. This is something he's going to come back to constantly, several times. And that's just a beautiful picture. If you as an individual are ever in a position to be able to try to judge a situation on whatever level, try to remember that. Try to be just. Try to be fair. Don't show partiality. And he's going to come back to this again, so we'll be able to talk about it some more. But it's just so important. Justice, verse 20, and only justice. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Justice and only justice. And I know we've talked about this before, but this is the fact that there is no justice in the land is something that really hurts a righteous person's soul. We look at all the perversion of justice and how unfair things can be at times. And it hurts a righteous soul because you hate to see that. So as God's people, let's try always to enact justice and only justice any chance we get. All right, we'll pick up in chapter 17 for next week. 17 starts talking about more of the forbidden worship and then also the judges and the kings. So we got about